one thing that's super important and can kill all of this practice completely. Every time you make the air ball, it can be completely defeated easily, instantly, and totally by the rankest beginner simply by leaning. You've got to understand, this is why leaning is so forbidden in Taiji schools, because it destroys the practice of the school. In other words, I am creating this something that uproots her. She doesn't have to go, she can simply lean against me, and it does not work anymore. But I can look at this as if everything I've done up to this point is to trick her into leaning. Leaning is a terrible thing to do when you're fighting. It's the dumbest thing possible. Because when somebody leans, they can be taken advantage of. Now, that's the biggest leaning possible, where the person leans so much they actually take a step. Obviously, if that happens, you got it. They're completely vulnerable. But suppose they lean not enough to take a step, but just enough to recover. Okay? Let's make it a little bigger. All right. So I get this uprooting position, and now she leans on it. And now she comes back. Now when she comes back, in other words, what happens when I release this is it makes a wave. She recovers. When she recovers, I follow that recovery perfectly. If I try to overdo that recovery, if I try to follow faster, slower, or any way at all, it won't work. I have to catch the wave that she makes. So, if she makes, like I say, a really big wave, it's easy for me to catch. And then at this exact moment where she comes back, at that moment, she's not leaning. Because leaning means, you're overbound. Leaning, by the way, leaning is not a position. This is not leaning. Leaning is when if you're not supported, you're going to fall. You're going to take a step, you're going to move, right? So, all I have to do is create this. And now, when she recovers, she's not going to recover to she's going to recover to a perfectly double-weighted position. And when she does, now I uprooting moves perfectly. Right? But it has to be exactly on that timing. If I go like this, if I try to come back and pretend the wave was faster than it was, make more out of it, the whole thing, it goes completely. So, eventually, of course, you get higher and higher skilled people. Their leaning will become this fractional thing that they just barely recover from. So you're like, So that's when you do it fast. In other words, when they're fast. When you're like, you have to be, you have to keep exactly the rhythm that they set with their movement. And the reason, and the way you make them set the movement is by releasing them completely. So there's two skills here. One is don't lean, which is very hard to do because we don't think of it as leaning. She starts to push me. And I think, go ahead. I think, I don't want to be pushed. I don't think I'm leaning. I think I'm just being strong. But when she releases me, I actually was leaning. So be ready for this. A lot of times when you don't think you're leaning, you actually are. Because when the person releases you, it makes a wave. Now, suppose she releases me now. I'm not leaning. So, if there's no wave, you're not leaning. If you're leaning, there will be a little wave that's produced. So that's the one skill, is don't lean in the first place. The other skill is, when the other person leans, release them completely. This also seems to be a very hard skill to cultivate. Because people will release everyone like 99%, but they don't want to let them go all the way. So, okay, now I want to push back. You have to let them completely go. This is when you become a ghost. And this is when you can become a ghost, because you have trapped them, in a sense, into a completely predictable movement. So there's no reason you can't completely neutralize them. Absolutely. So they should feel nothing at all. If they feel anything, the wave's killed. They'll sort of return, but you'll find that you're not in any kind of perfect timing with them at all. You have to let them go all the way. And you have to be prepared for the fact that until you practice this a little, you will not release them completely.